Hey guys, Hink here. Today we're going to be discussing a pretty spicy topic, and that is which is better, water versus air, and which do I recommend for you. So stay tuned and we're going to get right into it. All right, guys, I'm go by the name of Hink. I'm actually a real medical doctor. I have a passion for men's health. And so today we're going to be discussing a topic that comes up a lot on our forum, Getting Bigger, which is basically which kind of pump is better, air or water, and which would I recommend. And so we're going to break down topic by topic, which would I recommend. And so we're going to start with air. The number one thing about air, which this is a high quality air pump with a gauge from Peak Male Physique. You can get them from many different places. There's Lay Love, Mustang, I think like LA Pump. This is just one of many good ones. This just happens to be the best priced, but really it's convenience. Okay guys, when you air pump, you don't have to worry about the water, you don't have to draw a bath, you don't have to do any of that. You just literally apply this. A lot of people need to use a lubricant, which that can add to the inconvenience aspect of this, but in general, you put it on, you pump it up, you don't have to do a lot of like workup for it. Okay. The other thing, in general, when you use an air pump, it normally comes with a gauge, and you can actually determine what pressure you're using because this needle spins and you can see exactly how many inches of mercury or how many millimeters of mercury with which you're pumping. The reason why that is important is because if you don't know what pressure you're pumping with, it can actually get very dangerous. And there's people, especially who use a water pump, which we're going to talk about in a second, that actually injure themselves because they just put it on and pump and pump and pump. They don't know what pressure they're using, and bam, major injury comes, okay? The other thing that is, so this is just something that's different between the two, is that this tube is basically completely clear. So you can see the entire length of your member. Now, what you can't see when you have something like this water pump here is that there is this plastic tube that covers essentially the entire base. And so when you are using something like this, which I didn't realize, is that the base of your shaft actually typically expands a lot more than the more distal portions of your member. And so it can actually be pretty alarming when you look at first and you see that basically your base is completely expanded and almost against the glass, but then the rest of your member looks kind of normal in there. And I think that was clever marketing by this company because all you can see is basically the top part of your member in this one, and so it looks a lot more cosmetically appealing. The other thing is that because this is completely clear, you can see any kind of discoloration rather than, this is kind of clear, but it still kind of distorts it because number one, you're using water. Water has refraction, and so things can actually appear 1/3 larger than they otherwise would. So when you're using this and you pump with water, it's actually going to look significantly bigger, but that's from the refraction of the light. Whether with this, it gives you a more realistic perspective. And so this can be a little bit disappointing because you use the water, you pump it up, and you're like, man, I look huge in here. And then you take this off and you're like, oh, back to reality. Where this, you put it on, you pump it up, and then you take it off. You're like, oh, wow, it's reality in the tube and then reality out of the tube. So that's a little difference there. So one of the biggest differences between the two for me is that when you use an air pump, so it has this glass base right here, okay? And that base is actually pretty hard, okay? So especially compared to like this, where you have like a softer rubber tube there, okay? And so when you use that softer rubber tube, it is like much more comfortable in your actual pelvis. And so you can actually almost like pump to higher pressures using this because when you put it on your pelvis and pump it up, it actually is like much more kind of comfortable in general, in my experience, than using this, which is hard and it doesn't give. Now, personally, I like that about this because it actually limits my actual set time and it actually limits the amount of pressure that I can use. And so I don't go to as high a pressure and I tend to pump with smaller sets, which I personally think is a better thing. Whereas this, you can put it on and you can, pump all the way up and you can leave it for, 20, 30 minutes, an hour. And I think it would still in general feel more comfortable than this would. So just to be clear, like this is I don't know if I would call this a negative, but it's a negative and a positive of the air pumps in general, is that in my opinion, the base is more uncomfortable, but it actually allows you to have safer and more efficient pumping. And if we didn't talk about this, which I know we did, this has the gauge where you can see how much you're pumping. It's a crapshoot. You have no idea kind of what you're pumping with. Those that aren't really familiar with me, if you look up my handle there, I actually made a pretty impressive breakdown, in my opinion, of the actual Bathmate pumping. You know what you're pumping with. This actually goes to about somewhere around 14 to 16 inches of mercury based on basically, I think that they measure it on the website, the BM website, as like bar. And so you know how many bar, you can just convert that to basically inches of mercury. And it actually does kind of correlate. When I go about 90% in this, it does pretty much correlate with about 10 inches of mercury on here. And so I think max pressure, this goes up to about 14 to 16, whereas this you can honestly, pump as high as your gauge is, but in general, this is a much safer approach because once again, you know exactly what you're pumping with. I think a huge plus for the air is that in general, even if you're not using, this specific one, they're much, much cheaper in general. And so when you use like this fancy air pump, which I don't even want to mention the name because I don't recommend it and I'm not an affiliate or anything like that, but it's like $300. Now, sometimes it comes with like fancy packaging and like this box, but at the end of the day, it's still like $300 or more. Whereas this, you can literally get the tube, the gauge, the cylinder, and even an extra cylinder, and it's less than $100. And so it's like less than a third of the price. Like this thing, last time I checked, was like maybe $70 on Peak Male Physique, where this is like $300. The other thing is, so if you want to use water in this, you can literally get a water trap like this. You can put water in here, and then when you pump out the water, it'll go into here, so you can actually use water with this air pump and actually convert this to a water pump. So if you want to use water or you want to use air, this is a much more versatile option for you, which is why I tend to recommend it. So that was largely focused on air. We're now going to transition a little bit to more talking about water. And so the reason why I like water is typically because I use warm water with it. I do think there's a benefit. I think it's kind of a milder benefit, but I do think there is a benefit to using warm water when you pump. It improves circulation. In general, I think you can get better expansion of the tissue. And in general, I mean, there's even some benefit that applying heat to collagen allows it to expand in a safer way, essentially. And so there is the benefit to warm water. And I will tell you that I personally do like the way I feel using warm water pumping rather than like just air pumping alone. The other thing about water is, in theory, you get a more uniform distribution of actual pressure. So water does not compress. Even when you are, which actually makes water a little bit more dangerous, because when you are pumping out water, you get that whatever you pump out, you get an immediate increase in pressure. There's no give. When you use air that has some compressibility, it has some kind of, for lack of a better word, dead zones in the pump. And so you can gradually pump up, and it actually takes a while for the pressure in the chamber to actually account for that. So you're less prone to injury that way. Where this, the second you pump, it's going up. And so especially the model of this without this top here, and you just kind of push it into your pelvis and jam it in there. That to me is particularly dangerous. I've talked about it a dozen times before, but you have something right on the top of the shaft, which basically goes into your pelvis. It's called the neurovascular bundle. It's arteries, veins, and nerves, and you can actually be pressing that right into the arteries, veins, and nerves, and that can actually put you more prone to injury as well. But pushing this in there like that, combining with the fact that you're just jamming this in here, squirting out the water, it's going to cause a dramatic and an immediate rise in pressure, which is why there are, a decent number of guys that actually injure themselves using this base model. Now, if you get the model that has the actual pump, you can actually gradually, slowly, build up your pressure that way rather than just like these immediate pressure increases, okay? But because the water doesn't compress, it also applies a more uniform structure, a more uniform suction, negative pressure around your member, and so you can get, in theory, a more uniform pump. Now this is kind of a sillier thing, and it's almost a negative, but when you compress this tubing, so this actually comes built in with a little ruler on here, and so basically the more you compress this down, the higher the number gets on here. Once again, it can give you this artificial sense of man, I'm huge. Number one, because of the refraction of the water, it actually looks a third bigger, a third thicker in the tube. And then number two, based on how much you compress this, you can actually get as high as basically off the charts here, and it's really just because this is compressed all the way down. Now that would mean you're pumping at a very high pressure, but you can still get to a very high number on here, which can make you feel good, be like, oh wow, it's really going up there. Whereas this, I love this because it's much more is actually more like honest. I mean, you can tell, like, this isn't going to compress. Like, yes, this can actually go further and further into your fat pad, and so you can kind of climb the numbers that way. But in general, I think it's just a much more like honest, for lack of a better word, way to pump, because you don't have that refraction from the water if you're not using water in here, and it does that, the bottom doesn't compress. And so, you know, if you're, you know, up here at 7, then you're up here at 7, and it isn't contingent upon how much this is compressed. I will say that, you know, I'm definitely more used to this because I started off using this for basically the first, you know, 2 years of this. It's only been actually the past like 2 to 3 months that I've been using the air pump. And so part of it is like, I'm used to using water, and I'm used to using this device. So to me, this is like very easy to, like, I know exactly what my routine is. I put it on, like, I know how to pump it up. I know how to get the water ready. And it's just like almost like auto mode. I don't have to think about it. Whereas, with the air pump, it's definitely getting that way. It's just, I'm not into my routine quite as much. Now, I will say that, like, I mean, my routine is kind of crazy to say it out loud. It's like, you know, I have a shower in my basement. I like to keep this discreet, you know, whatever, at me in the comments, whatever. So I wake up early in the morning before I go to the gym. I basically turn on my water, heat it up until it heats up. Fortunately, I have like basically the Insta hot water. You know, I'm not here flexing on people, but, and so it only takes about 30 seconds to get hot water down in my basement. So then I wait for that to get hot, basically take off all of my clothes, and I basically fill this up with water and stand in a shower with this on me, and then like pump it up. And I don't have the shower running the whole time, but it is weird. I'm just like standing there nude in the shower with this on. So if there would be like an emergency or something, I would have to like decompress this, take it off, pour out the water, like pull up my pants, and then like run out, you know what I mean? And so it's far less inconvenient than this, where you can just literally just drop trowel, throw that on, and you're done. Something happens, you just decompress, put that away, and you're upstairs. It's just a lot more inconvenient to use this, even if you have to use it in the bath, which is probably the best way to do it. But it's like, you have to freaking run a bath and then like sit in the bathtub. And for those that can do it and, you know, don't care about the utility bill to do this every day, you know, more power to you. Just, it is much more inconvenient to use this. And so, you know, what are the conclusions? What am I using? Well, funny you should ask that, because I'm certainly using these supplements that I developed. You know, we got our Vigor on Amazon, getting amazing reviews. Also on my T-Booster, I'm in my 40s. I need every ounce of testosterone I can get. This stuff works. Morning erections are back. And then, of course, our Virility, which is our load booster. You should check it out if you're interested. All of them available on LeviathanSupps.com. Some of them are available on Amazon, and we're working on getting more on Amazon. But I digress. So what am I using right now? I will tell you guys, for the past like 3 months, 90% of the time I'm using air. Like, I just am. It's just the convenience of it. And I'm out here, I work, gosh, I don't know. I work from like 6:30 to 5 every day at work, come home, try to do stuff with, you know, family life here. And then I have very little time. And so it's just, like every minute counts. And so to be able to just put this on, get my routine in and get it done, like I am just using this. It's way more convenient. Okay. If I had all the time in the world, what would I use? I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. I'm not an affiliate or anything. That's why I tried not to even say the name. But I do prefer the feel that this gets me better in general overall. I don't think that this is more effective than this as far as getting gains. I'm more used to this, but I prefer to use this a little bit better. I also have, it's basically like a little silicone ring that basically vibrates around this, and it does make it just a touch more pleasurable. So it's like just warm water, a mild vibration. It's just a much more pleasant experience overall, but it just takes so much longer. And you know, as far as like actual hang and like especially like flaccid hang and stuff, this might actually do a better job. Like I think it's negligible, the difference. I don't think you can go wrong with either one necessarily. I just think that this is a total ripoff, and I guarantee you, if I had started with this, I would just like LOL at this and be like, I can't believe people actually pay like $300 for that. Just my take. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you go on our subreddit, It's Getting Bigger, you will actually see a lot of this debate, air versus water, which is better, every day, because people don't use a search bar. But most of them say that most of them that have used both prefer air, okay? I'm a hot take hink, you know, that's my own personal nickname that I gave myself for a reason. But I actually just barely give the nod to this. It's just the time commitment for this makes it so much more inconvenient that I prefer to use this, okay? But thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you're looking to get this, peakmalephysique.com, guys. You won't find a better price for it. But like I said, there are other options, okay? If you need to reach me, my Patreon, Hink, Leviathan Supps, if you need any of these supplements. And I think that's it, guys. I will catch you on the next one. Peace.